We are live. What's up to the millions and millions in the YouTube audience tonight? Good afternoon and evening, everybody, depending on where you are.
Hey, Dagan, how's it going? And I don't know if Mick's back, but if Mick's back, what's up, Mick? And I can't believe that on a Halloween live stream, I'm the only one in costume.
Yeah, we didn't do the whole costume thing over here this year because they canceled our Halloween. So that just took all the fun right out of Halloween. If I can't go trick-or-treating with the little kids I live with, then why do I live with them? Exactly.
Right.
What's the point?
Clean up on that candy they don't want and all that good jazz.
Right. It's just they took all the fun out of my Halloween. It's horrible. You know, the only thing good about it is every TV station on the planet has tons of horror movies playing today. Right. That's the only benefit right now.
Yeah. Hey, Don Long, what's going on, buddy?
And that's what we're doing. This is a brand new venture, Beards on Film. We hope it catches on, and we do this regularly. Right now, we're planning on doing it twice a month on Saturdays. As far as how long it'll last, we don't really know. We're shooting for a certain time, but we've obviously got a bit of a format here we would like to stick to, and we're going to be talking our top scary movies or something with a Halloween bent to it. So our top 9, 3 from each of us. And getting into that discussion, we're going to start off with us talking kind of just a little bit basically about film and its importance to us. And if we get some feedback in the chat, we will hopefully be being able to address that and work it into the comments as well. Who's here? Eric Kennedy, good. Donald Long. I don't know Donald Long, but what's up, Donald Long? Thanks for being here. Jeff Rice, what's up, my man?
Yeah.
Hey, Sober Chef Erickson here. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. That's right.
No, it's Hagrid, dang it.
Yeah, it is Hagrid.
Yeah, I don't know how I used to do it when I had hair down halfway down my back. This stuff is warm.
Woo. Yeah, it is. I can imagine it would be after not having it for a while. Joe could grow hair. Look at that. He's got a great head of hair. He just keeps it shaved.
Yep.
Well, yeah. I mean, I short hair, no hair, big beard. That's the way things are supposed to be in life. That's just the way it's supposed to be out here, man. You know?
Yeah.
All right. So who wants to start off with why you are part of this venture, where your love of film has gotten you to where we're all sitting together talking on a Saturday night?
Go ahead, I believe it's age before beauty, actually. So I think that's one of you two.
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, that's me. I'm the old man at 52. So what got me into movies was when I was a kid. Back then, we had a whopping 4 channels. We had PBS, ABC, CBS, and NBC. And well, ABC used to do the Sunday night movie, and it was normally Disney. And hey, what's up, Johnny Grooms?
Hey, JJ.
And so as a family, we would watch a movie, and that's where I kind of got it ingrained. You can't go to a movie or talk about movies without some popcorn. Because my dad, it was like a religion with him. Every year, if a new type of popcorn maker came out, we got it for him, and so, that started it. And then in Hutchinson, Kansas, where I grew up, hey, what's going on, Tomahawk, Adrian? We would, in the summers, our grade school, you could buy movie passes, and it was like every Wednesday or whatever. And me and my friends would go down and see all these movies, and none of them were brand new movies. It was always like, this is in the mid 70s, and they're showing like the 1968 Batman movie with Adam West and Cesar Romero, and Herbie the Love Bug, and I can't remember some of the other movies, but all those kid type of bed knobs and broomsticks. Yeah. Yeah. And, all those kind of, real kid friendly movies. So, I started going to movies a lot. And then as I got older, with my different mood disorders, anything to escape and get out of my head so I could really focus in on a movie. And so I've been watching movies, and I've got a decent little library built up. A lot of them have gone away, but I'm starting to build it back up. And so that's where my love of cinema came in.
All right.
Is it my turn now? Is it?
Go right ahead, Joe, because I am older than Eric and more beautiful than you, so I will go last.
Oh, wow.
I thought I graduated before you, Joe.
You may have graduated, but I am 53 and a half, my friend. Almost 53.
Oh, okay.
That was rough. All right. Not to sound like cliche or anything, but my love for the movie started with my family. Growing up, my uncles, not that I'm as old as these two at all, but my uncles had all the cool stuff back then. So they had the VHS player in their room. They had the 8-track system. They had, all that stuff. I wanted to hang out with them. And my oldest uncle, my Uncle Barry, was actually into like making costumes and things like that for B-rate horror films. And getting to see that kind of stuff and be around it. And they were just such movie heads. Anytime something dropped, I think most of it was because they had the surround sound system and all that. So they just wanted to put anything on the damn screen just so they could show the women they were bringing over. Look, see that? Look at all them speakers, right?
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I got to see some really awesome movies. And then traveling forward, my grandfather definitely introduced me to films that they wouldn't have watched. They were big into horror, things like that. He taught me about Westerns, the old war movies, stuff like that. And I mean, it just kind of stayed. The only one who didn't have much to do with it was my dad, because anytime we went to the movies, my dad fell asleep. That was just, it was on cue. I swear to you. And he snored loud. All right. So you'd have people watching the movie. My dad would like real loud, and you'd have them look back. And I'm like, there's nothing I can do. Like, I can't help you.
That remark.
It is what it is. So, I just love movies, man. It's an escape from everyday life. You can escape the realities of your life and go dive into anything. Doesn't matter what it is, man. If Sam wants to watch Harry Potter for 8 hours, I'm in.
When Eric and I were kids, it was a much more innocent time. I'm actually going to talk more about my movie present than my movie past, but I just remember going to a lot of theaters. And in fact, my number one film tonight, I saw when I was 5 or 6, and maybe that's why it was my number one film, but it's roundly considered one of the scariest films of all time anyway. But I just remember you could take your son or daughter to an R-rated film if they were really young and not have society frown upon you. It just wasn't that big a deal. Fast forward to me, as many of you know, I'm a teacher. And one of the hardest things with today's kids when you're competing with YouTube and their phone and everything is engagement. They don't want to read novels. They don't want to get into it. So I started thinking, how can I engage these kids? And I thought of film. And not just the stereotypical throw the videotape into the VCR for 45 minutes and let's burn through the class. No, I wanted to teach film. To teach film, I had to learn film. Right. So I learned film. I got the bare bones basics. I had actually taken one film course in college as I was, getting actually going for my master's degree. So I had been a teacher for a little bit. I had a little bit of knowledge. I had that college textbook, and I just started teaching and staying just a few steps ahead. Then I started adding more films. And my kids absolutely loved it. And I killed the dragon of engagement. And that's what really got me into it, like going, holy cow, this is magical in a school setting. And so now my goal is to still keep learning, because I don't have nearly all of it done, and to maybe approach certain genres that I've always kind of closed myself down to, because from a content perspective, I didn't like it. Well, now I just want to go in with more the critical eye and look at the art of it itself, because my main problem with film is we bring up our kids and our youth to be passive receptors of film rather than active engagers with the film, and give them the tools and the skills to read it like they would read a good piece of literature or poetry, etc.
Wow.
Nice.
Your intro was incredibly thought out. I feel like a turd right now. Wow. That was
right, Joe, the reason this is going to be a great experience is we all are coming at it from totally different angles.
I've always been amazed at the fact that you actually teach like film, and it's amazing, man. It's like you did what I wanted to do. Had I have just not been so lazy, I'd have gone to film school and all those kinds of things. And I don't know if I'd have been a film teacher, but I would have been involved in film somewhere in my life. So I think it's really cool that that's what you do.
I've had fights. I'm currently at a crossroads in my career because of a really horrible time last winter. You know, I don't get into all that too much. I had my seniors. I finally got a film class that was part film, part British Lit. There's a long story, but it culminated with a bunch of kids who I used to have as sophomores, because I teach usually sophomore English. I had most of my senior class were those former kids. Those kids would walk through fire for me. And once they learned what was going on, they were going to march on the school board. And I had to talk them down off of that. Rather, you know, I had the rabble roused, if you will.
Yeah.
It was touching to my heart, but I also knew politically it wasn't a smart thing to do.
Right.
But so I'm at this weird place professionally with it, which is why an outlet like this, or what you and I were trying to do, Joe, with Film Bits and 2 Cups of Joe, that helps me get the release that I may no longer get professionally.
I think the difference between this and the film bits is that we don't have to rely on the film bits as much. You know, I think the problem we were having there was obviously YouTube taking down our stuff because you had to put clips for the movie in, and we were playing the movie essentially and then talking about our experiences through it. Unfortunately, YouTube doesn't really care for all that stuff, apparently.
No. So, unfortunately, before we get started, because we're going to jump right in here, unfortunately, if you were following the news today, we had a big loss in the movie community. Eric wanted to say something about it. So, Eric, I'm going to let you lead on that one.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, today we lost Sean Connery. You know, when I think of James Bond, I think of Sean Connery. You know, when I think of Indiana Jones, I think of Sean Connery playing the bumbling dad, you know. You know, he lived 90 years, you know, 1930 to 2020. And, you know, I saw that one of the first things this morning I saw on social media, and that really bummed me out because if Sean Connery was in it, I watched it.
Yeah.
And I didn't care what genre it was. If he was in it, I was down. So he's been one of my longtime top favorite actors, you know, and yeah, it's really a shame.
I know.
So, pretty good.
Just a side note, Sean Connery doesn't get all the adoration he deserves. He's not as appreciated as I think he should be. And the man has hidden gems out there that you might not have seen. Like his performance in a movie called Finding Forrester was absolutely an amazing performance.
Yes.
Just incredible from beginning to end. He absolutely commanded your attention on that screen. He was a true legend, an icon in the film world. And here's the sad part. I didn't hear about it at all today. I didn't see anything, nothing. And like, to me, it shouldn't have been me having to go search out to find out about it. The social media waves and everything else should have been flooded with the news that he had passed.
Yeah.
You know, so rest in peace, and great legend that we lost today.
A couple things I want to say about Sean Connery. We talk about 90 years. So the man lived through the Depression. The man lived through World War II, and he actually enlisted in the military. He lived through all the turmoil of the 60s. He lived through Y2K. He lived through COVID. The man had quite a life. I was a big Bond head in high school. I decided after watching a bunch of Bond movies, I was going to read all the novels and do my Bond research. And I found out that Ian Fleming hated Sean Connery as Bond because Connery had that thick Scottish brogue. And to Fleming's Bond was like erudite, well-spoken Englander. And interestingly, they did a sketch of Bond early on, and it wound up being very close to Roger Moore. Only Roger Moore was doing the Saint television show at the time. They wound up going with Connery, and no one until Daniel Craig, for me, holds a candle to Bond. Moore's was too gimmicky. Brosnan's was too pretty. Dalton was okay. He just kind of didn't fit. And that one film with George Lazenby, which is arguably the best Bond film ever if Connery is in the role, and that is On Her Majesty's Secret Service. That if you haven't seen that James Bond film, that is a great story. It's just I wish we would have had a different Bond.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like I say, I grew up. My mom's English, so I was raised with Benny Hill. I was raised with Monty Python, and so some of the first big action movies I went and saw was James Bond.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So Johnny, just one more thing. Johnny mentioned one more that I think is an underrated one as well. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Another great performance by him. I think the only thing that really hampered that movie was they didn't really surround him with the greatest cast in history. I thought that was the only thing that hampered the film, really, because storyline wasn't terrible. He killed it. I thought it was just the things around him. So, again, my grandfather loved the man. That's because he was a huge Bond fan, though. I was not that big of a Bond fan growing up, and I'm still not to this day. I don't know why. It's just never really been a franchise that's really rang true to me for some reason, but I respect the man for the things he's done. He's a legend, period.
I hated that film because I don't know if you guys know this, but like V for Vendetta, From Hell with Johnny Depp, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and most commonly known, The Watchmen. All those were comic books first, and they all came from the fan of the same man by the name of Alan Moore. And League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in a comic book is amazing. The conceit of taking all of these great Victorian characters and putting them together like a super team, and it's really well handled. And they turned it into to me, a B grade action film. And I feel unfortunate that Connery is associated with that because it's kind of one of the last films we know him for. It might even be the last movie we think of when his name's big up on the marquee, because he did go into retirement for many, many years, recently. Okay, so let's jump into some scary films. Now, I'm only going to call to start first because my first one is going to be quick, all right? So we're going to do our number threes, and my number 3 is less scary, but very Halloween-y. But it was very scary to a particular member of my family. And my number 3, and this used to be a Halloween tradition that we've gotten away from as the twins have gotten older, is The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I'm a huge Jack Skellington fan. I have a stuffed Jack Skellington. But my son, Dante, my twin, when we would watch Nightmare Before Christmas, he would freak out due to this dude. The Oogie Boogie Man, all right? Whenever Oogie Boogie came on the screen, he cried. He fretted. If you haven't seen Nightmare for any reason, those are bugs and squirmy things in Oogie Boogie's mouth there. He cried and fretted and all this kind of jazz. And my wife bought me for many years there Christmas ornaments. I have like Jack Skellington in a Santa costume on a sled. And then I got balls, like really nice painted ornaments where one of them was Oogie Boogie. And I couldn't even put it up on the Christmas tree because Dante would look at it and freak out. So while we all know it's kind of fun and a cool little film, it legit scared my son for 2 or 3 years there to where I couldn't even have my Christmas ornaments up.
Well, I can't blame any kid for being afraid of that, honestly. I really can't.
Yeah, I got 2 things to say about that. First, Joe's got Oogie Boogie balls.
Yeah, he did just say that. He did just say that. Okay.
And I like that movie a lot, but I like it more for the reason that I'm not much on a lot of the Christmas movies, and I consider that more of a Christmas movie. But that's me. I know that's a big debate, among some of my friends.
Yes,
just like is Die Hard a Christmas movie? No,
right.
We don't have time for it tonight.
I like genre splitters like that. I like having a 1 foot in Christmas movie and 1 foot in a Halloween movie because there are tons of great Christmas movies, Eric, but there aren't too many. If you rule the horror films and the Halloween franchise aside, there aren't too many great. I like Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. There just are great Halloween movies out there that focus on Halloween.
And I can't believe they're not showing Great Pumpkin this year.
Oh, they aren't. Maybe too many kids aren't trick or treating. I don't know. So here's what I think we should do, just for the heck of it. So for this one, we'll go clockwise. We'll go Eric, Joe. And then Joe, you'll end on your number 3, and you'll come back on your number 2, and we'll circle back to me. How's that sound? So we have an order. Do it that way. All
Works
right.
for me.
All right, Eric. So go ahead and share your third scariest movie, or however you want to classify it.
Okay, the way I kind of did it, because I didn't know the age range of people that might be attending. So I did my favorites from the 2000s. So I have a quick honorable mention that's actually the only true Halloween movie in my little arsenal, and that's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, or Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, the Ichabod Crane story from that we read in school every year at Halloween. Before we were able to read too much, the teacher read it to us, and then we pretty much had to read it every year. So just wanted to throw that honorable mention out there. Now, my number 3, everything kind of got mixed around because originally I went and bought this just for tonight. And I get home because it was from a used movie place and the thing was shrink wrapped. But look at what I got instead. Nightmare on Elm Street 3. No, that's no good. But so I went with one that I already own, and it's the uncut edition, and it even has a little saw that moves around the case.
That's cool.
Yeah. But Saw, originally, I was wanting to do a Wes Craven flick, but all the ones I wanted to get, I thought I had it, but I was wrong. But, so unfortunately, since there's no Wes Craven, I went with Saw as my number 3. And one of the reasons I went with that one is, to me, the slasher type horror movies, those are more like comedies for me, my taste. I never got that kind of reaction at one of those. But Saw, man, that movie creeped me out, because there could be a sicko out there that would do something like this, whereas the bad guy that can't be killed or comes back from the dead or is an alien or whatever the case may be, just, doesn't do it for me. It's got 9 movies in the collection. Cool thing, this first one was filmed in 18 days with a budget of $700,000. And that's that would be like if Nightmare on Elm Street, which I did research on as well, was filmed today, it would have been a $2 million budget. So, considering just a portion of most movies that are made, and Saw, it generated 9 movies. So, your guys' thoughts, and also one thing that was cool is originally they didn't want to have Jigsaw in the movie. That wasn't the kind of aim of the very first movie. So
I saw the first 3. The novelty of it wore off after that, but
yep.
I really, really enjoyed the first one, and then aspects of 2 and 3, the traps and the puzzles. I thought that was such a unique take, and harken kind of back to comic books for me, because certain comic characters always face those kinds of things, and so I really, really enjoyed that.
I enjoyed, same as me, Joe. I enjoyed the first few, and then as things evolved on, I just felt like they were kind of weeding out and getting a little thin as things went on. Now, I heard the last few that they made, whether I think it was 7 or 8 or whatever, that they kind of reinvented the franchise and things kind of came back to life. But I would have to actually watch, I think it's 6, so I could watch 7 and 8. And I lost myself. But I remember when the original came out, and for a movie that is predominantly shot in one room,
yeah,
with 2 guys in it,
yeah,
it was a hell of a film. Like, yeah, incredible performances all around in that film.
Yeah. There is something. I mean, obviously, every horror movie, the lighting, it's going to be dark and this and that, etc. But whether it's the domestic setting of a Halloween or a Scream or the camp setting of Friday the 13th or whatever, there is a grime and a dirt and a filth about the Saw movies, probably because they're in that room and they're staying there for days. And that just kind of, I think it adds this extra kind of layer or film of to you, you know, because you're outdoors, and you know, when Jason isn't around, the camp is a pretty cool place. You're outdoors, you can boat, you can fish, you know, but there's nothing pleasant about the settings in Saw, man. It's just always just ugh.
Yeah, I almost got tetanus just watching it, you know. All right. Go ahead, Joe.
All right, so my number 3 simply became my number 3 because it was the first movie that ever truly scared me. Now, granted, I was about 6 or 7 when my uncles let me watch this, so maybe that was part of the reason, but it was the first movie that truly scared me and stuck in my brain for a long time, and that was the original Nightmare on Elm Street, the very first appearance by Freddy. It was absolutely and utterly horrifying for me in so many ways. Like I said, I was about 7, and my horrible uncle said, "Yeah, come in our room. Come watch the new movie we rented tonight. Come on in." And yeah, it did a number on me. And Wes Craven, actually, pretty cool story, came up with the idea based off of a group of reports of young people who were doing like studies about, here it is right here, news reports about mysterious death dreams. And one of the young men who actually wrote the reports passed away sometime later, like a little bit down the road while this was all going on. So Wes Craven, of course, in his mind went, well, this is pretty cool, and took that whole idea and spun it into a man who could come after you in your dreams. And as a 6-year-old kid, there is nothing more horrifying on the planet than the thought of the things I dream about can actually hurt me. Like, that's a reality. Can that happen? Because when you're 6, what's up on that screen isn't a joke.
Yeah,
that's reality, man. That's life. And to me, Freddy was larger than life, and he was as scary as could be. Now, I did some research on the budget. It was $1.8 million, and it made 25 million by the end of its release. So that means that first weekend worldwide, all that, its release week, if you will, it cleared 25 million. And on a whole, the franchise is actually worth $630 million.
Jesus.
So Wes has had a lot of fun with this whole franchise, you know, from every single version of it down to the new nightmares and all that. But nothing for me was scarier than that original film. And that scene with Johnny Depp, which this is Johnny Depp's acting debut, right? This is it. And there it is. That's his biggest moment in that movie, is where he gets turned into what looks like an oil refinery of blood. and that sums up Johnny's entire, he was the boyfriend that became what looked like a modern art piece at the end of it all. Like, that's what happened to Johnny.
Yeah.
And we all know what Johnny's career went on to be, but that's where it started. Okay, that's where it started, with Freddy doing that to him. And at my age, that was horrifying. All right, horrifying. And dead on, I was doing some research. The crazy part is Wes Craven almost didn't cast Robert Englund as Freddy. It almost didn't happen. The man who played Freddy forever, almost didn't even get casted. He wanted to go with a more refined, more polished English actor who he thought would come across as scarier. But Robert Englund actually gets the job because that guy turned the role down.
Oh, wow.
The first guy turned down Freddy, which means, I wonder how bad he looks back at that one.
Right.
He's probably lost quite a bit of money there. But in return, Robert Englund gets the call. Wes is like, hey, man, you're the guy now. And he launched what became arguably one of the most sadistic killers in movie history, because Freddy didn't just kill you. He played with his food. Like, he had to mess with you first. He was the guy that cut the wings off the fly, watched it squirm, then stepped on it. That was Freddy. And again, 6 years old. My uncles totally screwed me up for life, completely.
Let me jump into the comments here. Old Ron, Deliberately Bearded mentioned Terror Train. If you're old enough, you remember that one. If I'm not mistaken, that was Jamie Lee Curtis after her success in Halloween when she became like the first 70s scream queen, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Joe, Jamie Lee. The original was amazing, but the new Nightmare was amazing and loved it. Was tidy. The original and set in quote real life, says Everett. Just read a Robert Englund's biography. It was a good read. Nice to know, Jeff. Awesome. And it made me think when I saw the Terror Train, and Eric was talking about comedy. I saw a film like Friday the 13th scared the bejesus out of me, but right around that same time, there was a film that was half scary and half funny, and that's because even in the era of where special effects are obviously CGI, these are bad ones. Who remembers Phantasm, man?
I remember Phantasm.
Flying ball. That was a killer to me, but it was a combo of spooky comedy. The older you get, I think the funnier it gets. But Terror Train made me think of Phantasm. All right, Joe, we're going to keep it. It's like a serpentine draft. We're going to keep it. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
One other fact real quick for you guys that I found pretty cool. In 1991, Los Angeles actually declared a Freddy Krueger Day in L.A.
And the news, should, man.
For September the 13th, which was a Friday the 13th, right? Which was, the playoff on Jason there and take their jabs, right? But they declared a National Freddy Krueger Day, to which the LA Times wrote, the fact that our home is making a national day for a man who maims and kills people tells you all we need to know about this society. And I went, it absolutely does. Leave our icons alone if you don't get it. Back off.
I think I've gotten to the age, I did the Halloweens and I did the Friday the 13th, but right around when Freddy came in is when I moved away from horror and was exploring other things. So I understand. I've seen Elm Street, the original, but I haven't seen any others.
Yeah, I saw Elm Street in the theaters. Loved it.
Yeah, great conceit for the time.
Once the 3D hit, that's kind of where it,
The only one that really just did not do it for me at all was when they remade Nightmare on Elm Street. It was just a big swing and a miss for me. It wasn't Freddy. Like, it wasn't him. It just didn't feel right at all. And it just didn't work at all. Sometimes things don't need to be remade, man. Not unless you're going to do it the right way. Like, I'm all for the fact that they could do much better horror movies now with the updated CGI and things. I get it. That doesn't mean you should forget the storyline. All right, my number 2, right? I'm up.
Well, hold on just a sec, Joe. Mick, man, brave admission from with all this testosterone. He says scary movies actually give him nightmares, so he doesn't watch them. That's interesting, Mick. Sorry, Joe. Go right ahead. You're number 2.
My number 2 was the one that it had made me a fan forever. This was the one that he is still my horror god. Like, this is the guy for me. He always will be the greatest slasher man of all time. He's the legend. He is Michael Myers and is the original Halloween. It is the movie that made Jamie Lee Curtis the Scream Queen. Like, Halloween for me is one of the greatest franchises that's ever been invented. I love slasher flicks. I always have. Probably because my uncles were such huge slasher flick fans. And to me, Michael Myers was just a normal dude, essentially. So that made him pretty frightening, because that mask, actually, funny story, that mask was a stretched out and whitened Captain Kirk mask from Star Trek.
Oh.
That's how that mask got started.
That's a great piece of trivia, Joe. I never knew that.
That's how that mask got started. It was a Captain Kirk mask that was stretched out and whited out. And it was either that mask or another one that was an old clown one that they had found from some other B-rate horror film. I can't remember off the top of my head. And they picked the one they picked because when they whited it out, it looked like just a dead individual with soulless black eyes. Okay. And that was exactly what John Carpenter wanted for Michael. He wanted him to be the living embodiment of just an individual with nothing inside of him. No feelings, no nothing. So that is exactly why that mask was chosen. And at the end of the day, the Halloween franchise brought in over $640 million through all the incarnations and everything else. And you think about the fact that that mask was $2 and now you can go buy it for about $50. Tells you a lot about the way things are viewed nowadays. But do you know, honest story here, Halloween was not even going to be called Halloween. Can anybody guess what the original title was?
What was that title?
The Babysitter Murders.
Oh, shit. They did a way better job.
That's what John Carpenter was going to call it until his executive producer said that he felt the movie might do better if they tied it to a holiday. And that's when they tied it to Halloween forever. It became something that, dude, it's Halloween. You have to watch Halloween. It's just like a rite of passage or something. It has to be done, right? Yeah. But they were actually going to call it The Babysitter Murders. And the movie was supposed to focus more on Jamie Lee than it was anything else. Or the Laurie Strode character, I should say, because Jamie Lee Curtis actually was not going to get the role until they brought her in for her last performance, her last audition, and she did the role where she looks out the window and spots Michael for the first time. Apparently, she nailed that role so well that John Carpenter looked at his guy and said, she's the one. And he's like, yeah, but you just hired the other girl. He goes, I don't care. Fire her, hire her. That's who we're going with here. And that's it. And it's just, the whole movie's full of such cool little background stories. Like, did you actually pay attention to the movie? Have you guys seen the whole thing?
I saw it when it came out, Joe, and I may have seen it once more, but we're now talking 40 years.
All right. So if you watch the film, it's supposed to be on Halloween night, right? It's the fall. But if you look, they actually filmed that during the spring to have it released for October. So if you look up, they got dead leaves on the floor all over the place, but the trees are all green, and as bright as can be.
That is awesome.
You know, those are just cool little stories that make it amazing. And of course, one of the things that has made Mike is that he walks through everything. You shoot him, you blow him up, you stab him. He walks through it all. And in the original film, they actually had 3 different actors who played him in that film. You had 3 different actors. Yeah, 3 different actors. You had Nick Castle, who played him most of the time.
Okay.
He was Mike through most of the film. You had Tommy Lee Wallace, who was an executive producer, which basically means whatever the producer told him to do, he ran around and did whatever he had to do. Tony Moran played Mike for one day, one scene, the very last scene of the movie, and got $250 to come out and play that part real quick. Which back then,
that's 250 more like a K or so.
Yeah. So they filmed it in 20 days so that they could have it out, done, edited, all that for Halloween season. And in their haste and all that, it literally made Michael Myers become synonymous with Halloween. And for me and my uncles and my cousin and all of us, I don't know, man, it's like Michael Myers is a third uncle around here. We love the dude.
Yeah.
Absolutely love him.
That's great. That's good stuff, Joe. That is really good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. One last thing. John Carpenter actually wrote that in 10 days.
Wow.
He wrote the whole script in 10 days with his co-screenwriter, Deborah Hill. The whole thing, 10 days, done. So
because when I think of the modern horror genre, okay, because you have bits and pieces of, obviously you have Hitchcock doing stuff in the 50s and 60s that would have been considered horror in its time. But when we think about bloody horror, I'm going to either Halloween or Friday the 13th, part 1. Does anyone know which of the 2 premiered first? I want to say Friday the 13th was the first in theaters, but I do not know.
No, I think Mike was actually first, because I think Halloween was I think Friday the 13th was 1980, I want to say, if I'm correct.
Okay.
81.
And
81.
81, okay. And I believe the original Halloween was 1978.
78, yeah. That I thought Halloween was Friday the 13th was 77 and Halloween is 78. I know Halloween was 78, yes. Yeah, 81. Yeah. Good. Wow, so there'd actually been a few years gap there. That's cool, man.
Yep.
Now, and you could argue the fact that Mike had a lot to do with the inspiration behind what eventually became Jason Voorhees. You could argue that fact.
Particularly when we look at the acting of both characters, the fact that they both have a white face, more or less, right? Yeah, you would not be too far off if you made that interpretation, that analysis. I'm with you, Joe.
No, and I don't think it would be like a knock on the Friday the 13th genre at all.
No.
You look back, what do you do to get inspiration? You look at the films that have come before you, and if they just put out what's arguably the greatest slasher in history, of course you're going to want to pay a little bit of homage to that guy and what was created there. Yeah. Now, we all know what happened in the future. John Carpenter actually winds up walking away from the franchise because he's not happy with what's going on. And it turns out that the next film to him in the series doesn't come until 2017, basically, when he drops the next one.
Yeah.
They've had many ones in between there, but what has stayed through it all has been the fact that Laurie Strode has become the scream queen for us all. And Jamie Lee, no matter how many other movies she did, or how terrible they were, or how great they were, was forever Laurie Strode in every one of our eyes. And for me, how old was I when I saw this? Maybe like 10. She was the 18-year-old babysitter who I wish was babysitting me. That's what she was.
Yeah.
Okay. It was that simple.
And social commentary. Sometimes we take horror films and we're just like other slashers. To have a female protagonist that can beat back a monster in 1977, that's huge, because you just didn't see that. Their role, and a lot of times their role still is just to be afraid and be cannon fodder. But we see that's the mark for Friday the 13th. We have that in the Scream franchise. We have that. And that's another thing that I really like, because it gives us some sociological commentary that sort of elevates that film and makes it an argument for, feminist protagonists and the coming out of stronger female characters. I'm sorry, Eric. I think I stepped on you.
Oh, that's all right. I was just going to say, I was a little bit too young to see Halloween in the theaters, but I did see Friday the 13th in the theaters. So that's the only reason that I like that guy.
Right. Listen,
came from, I know where he came from and where the inspiration was and all that. But one thing that's really cool, I never knew that about the name of Halloween.
Yeah.
But now there are 2 movies that are on Netflix. You got The Babysitter and The Babysitter Murder Queen or Drama Queen, like that, which are slashers as well. Which, are they fantastic? Will they go down in history? No, but they're fun to watch. It's a nice brainless watch.
The bigger question to ask, honestly, is had they have named it The Babysitter Murderer, are we still sitting here talking about Michael Myers today?
No.
Is it still here today? I don't think it is. I think the Halloween tag was the perfect name to forever launch it into iconic stratosphere, pretty much.
Yeah, whereas Friday the 13th, they can pick any month out of the year that has a Friday the 13th, release it on that date, boom, they're golden.
Right. All right. Let's go to Eric. Let's get Eric's number 2 in here. Good job, Joe.
Okay. Just a second. My notes are disappearing. Okay, here it is.
We got notes, guys. Just what y'all know. We got notes.
Yeah, man. I did my homework. I didn't even do my homework in high school, but I did it for tonight.
Popcorn. Halloween candy.
Also, real quick, sorry to interrupt. If somebody could message Chris from that channel to be named later and remind him that I'm live and the not call right now, it'd be great, because he's called me twice. So just give him a heads up.
He was
okay, cool. Maybe he knows now. All right, cool.
All right.
I don't want him to think I'm ignoring him here.
Joe can't see the comments, guys. Yeah. So if there's something you want Joe to know, Bearded Life Joe, put it in the chat, and then one of us will relay that to him. So it's not that he's being an a-hole or anything. He just
my laptop keeps blacking out on me, so I'm not getting anything here, guys. But I appreciate everyone who showed up tonight, guys. Love you all. Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry. I keep cutting you off. You're up.
Yeah, we should have mentioned that earlier, But all right. My number 2, like I say, the slasher films I always found hilarious. I'm twisted, whatever. But the ones that always got to me that, kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies and everything. This one's Red Dragon. And for those who don't know what Red Dragon is, it was actually the first book in the Hannibal Lecter series written by Thomas Harris. And also what a lot of people don't know is Red Dragon wasn't the first movie adaptation of that book. The very first one was called Manhunter.
Manhunter. And that's such a hidden gem.
Yep. And yeah, the guy that was the star of that was William Peterson. And he was in my all-time favorite baseball movie called Long Gone. But he really didn't hit mainstream where everybody knew him until he was on CSI. And that cemented him in history and Hollywood and everything else. But and that movie was okay, but it didn't have the budget. Whereas after Silence of the Lambs came out, guess what? We can do a prequel and it'll maybe come close to making as much. So why not? Well, it did. And they ended up making the third book of the series. But yeah, Thomas Harris, I've read all three of the books. Because if I see a movie and I haven't read that author yet, I always like to get the book just because the books are always better.
Yeah.
Another cool thing about Red Dragon is a lot of people know Edward Norton from all the stuff he had done before. So he came in as a big name.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the woman that played his wife, Mary Louise Parker, she really didn't get recognized and really didn't become famous until she got the lead in Weeds, which was on Showtime.
Right.
Which I recently rewatched on Netflix. They've got all the seasons. I thought that show was hilarious.
It was great.
And another thing that a lot of people don't know, unless they've read the book or watched this movie before going into it, and even then they can forget about it, is that Will Graham, the character played by Ed Norton, he's the one that caught Hannibal Lecter. Now, if you've only seen Silence of the Lambs, he references Jack Crawford, who was the boss for Will and the boss for Clarice. So, right. But he wasn't the one that actually caught Hannibal. Hannibal was caught at the very beginning of the book Red Dragon. And I don't know how much it grossed, but I love those psychological thrillers. They just, something that keeps me on the edge and you're not sure what's going to happen. And then you think, okay, everything's winding down. Oh, wow. That's the kind of stuff that makes me jump. And stuff that can happen in real life, that's stuff that really gets to me. So that's why Red Dragon's my number 2.
Excuse me, sir. Are you trying to say that your big brother couldn't throw out a mask and decide to kill you one day?
Yeah, but I'm sure if somebody shot him, that would be it.
All right.
Or
All
if he was buried, I think that would be it. If
maybe
he killed him, that would be it, probably.
Maybe. Maybe.
A couple of things I want to say about that, Eric. I saw Manhunter on video. Didn't catch in the movies. It definitely has the feel of a lesser budgeted film, but it's so good. The acting is so tight. The story's so good. And the Hannibal Lecter is freaking stellar. Now, no one is going to touch Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. But when you see this guy first as Hannibal Lecter, you're like, whoa. And even going backwards, even if you're used to Hopkins as Lecter, he's still a great Lecter. And the dynamic of this guy who puts Lecter away now has to get help from Lecter. It's such a great plot device. If there are Silence of the Lambs fans out there, and Eric Kennedy just said he is, you gotta find Manhunter. What's that actor's name again, Eric? The guy from
William Peterson.
William Peterson, because I'm sure there are more than one Manhunter movie out there. Find Manhunter with William Peterson, and it is a true hidden gem.
And another great thing about the whole trilogy of Hannibal Lecter is the writer, Thomas Harris, was involved with the screenplays and everything else. It wasn't like they took the book like A Simple Favor. The movie, A Simple Favor, good. The book, amazing. They changed a lot of different things from the book into the movie. Whereas with Manhunter and Red Dragon, since Thomas Harris was involved with it, they kind of stayed true to the story, even though you missed some good parts.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Joe, you want to say anything about this before we move to my number 2?
I don't think he heard you.
Joe, do you want to say anything about Red Dragon or Dragon? I forget.
Sorry, my mic was wiring out there for a minute there. I was trying to get it fixed here. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
All right, cool. Good. Yeah, Red Dragon was, so here's a funny thing, right? I loved Silence of the Lambs. We've watched Hannibal together as a family. I guess that would be the 4th film in the franchise, correct? Hannibal would be number 4.
Well, and the TV series is
no. Oh, okay. I'm talking about Hannibal the actual Rising? Film one.
Oh yeah.
No, not Hannibal Rising. Okay. So you had Silence of the Lambs, and then you had the one where what's her name? Played Clarice that goes to look for him in France. That was Hannibal, correct?
That one, yeah.
Okay. So we saw those two, one after the other, me and my brother, and knew nothing about Red Dragon or Manhunter. We knew nothing about them. So when we learned about them, we were like, oh man, this is all about Hannibal, man. Like, we have to go check these out. We were becoming obsessed. I was convinced this dude was real out there somewhere, right? That he was based off someone real. I was convinced of it. So we went, saw him. Absolutely fantastic performance by Edward Norton. Anthony Hopkins, as always, is just stupid good as Hannibal. Like, it's almost insanity. But I know we're not talking about this one, but Manhunter is absolutely such a hidden gem that most people don't know about it.
Yeah, nice.
Most people don't know about it, but it is such a hidden gem in that series that if you watch them in the order they're supposed to be in, it really ties together so well, and it's just so well done. And again, Hopkins as Hannibal, it doesn't get any better.
Yeah. That's awesome. Joe, you don't see this in the chat, but the guy who was Buffalo Bill lives in Ryan's town, and Ryan delivers mail to him.
Yes, Sam.
Oh.
Yeah,
God forbid we have a live where Sam didn't interrupt, right? Use the Windex.
She needs her phone.
Go ahead, come on, I'm live. They're making fun of you because they can hear you whining. That's why they're making fun of you.
So it's just like Mel.
Hi, Sammy.
Joe, does Sammy put an extra syllable at the end of certain words? Like Bella will go, "Nazabana," and there's like this extra "na" that really doesn't belong on the word. Come on, nah, you know?
Yeah, when Sam wants to really drive me nuts, it's that elongated whine at the end of a word, and then a letter that has no purpose being there at all, other than she knows it's going to make me twitch a little bit. So, yeah, she knows how to drive me nutty. Trust me.
Yeah, and Camo Cam, Philip Seymour Hoffman was one of my favorites. You know, we lost him to opiates, like we've lost many other great talents. But yeah, even though it was such a small role in the movie, he was great. And Ted Levine, who played Buffalo Bill, also played Captain Stottlemyre on the series Monk with Tony Shalhoub, which is one of my favorite comedies. So yeah, Ted Levine, great actor, very underrated as an actor.
This almost reminds me of a future show, like, you know, talents we lost too early. I'm not going to go on a whole Hoffman jag here, but 2 things about Hoffman since you bring him up. Number 1, he did all these freaking films that no one really saw. They weren't big release, and he's so amazing. And he did more with bit parts, like in Boogie Nights and things like that. And yet he would do stupid companies like the Polly. What's the Polly film with Ben Stiller?
Polly.
Yes.
Where he sharded.
Where he sharded, right? He would do those kinds of goofy roles when he's a serious, talented dude. Love that guy. So sad. That was a real gut blow to me, Eric, when he died. That was a real gut blow. Never knew he had those issues, and man. All right. Anyway, number 2. We can come back in the future and talk Hoffman and others.
Absolutely. I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm an old man, all right? So this one goes back to the 70s, and it's actually, I didn't realize this until I started doing research for it. It was actually a TV movie, which blows me away. It was a 3-part TV movie, each segment starring Karen Black. And the famous of the 3 is known as Amelia. Okay? Amelia. But we, if you've seen it before, we know it by its actual title, which is the Trilogy of Terror.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And that little dude, the Zuni warrior, to me is a legendary character in horror, early horror film. I rewatched it. It had been ages. I rewatched it, and I'm not going to say it's great horror, but I could see why, as a kid, I was riveted to this stuff. He is so darn scary, this little guy, right? I'm not going to go into all the plot and everything, but this guy, well, actually, if we go back to the Twilight Zone, we get our first real doll horror case. All right. And maybe there was something earlier, but we get an episode of the Twilight Zone where the doll is the villain. And this was a few years later where we now have the doll. The doll in the Twilight Zone was just kind of laying around, and you heard its thoughts, and it was manipulating the girl. And then we get this dude. Now, in 2020, we want to watch a 1975 film or whatever the heck it is. There are times when the effects are not great, but God dang, that guy was scary. He was scary. And then using the camera at the low angle to show his movement and the noises that emitted from him and all that jazz. You can find this on YouTube right now. It's a 25-minute watch because, again, it was part of a 3-piece TV movie. I haven't even watched the other 2 pieces because it blows them out of the water, and I'm not going to spoil the end because the end is pretty cool. It does have some bumps and bruises on it because it ages well in some regards and it doesn't age well in others. But this little guy, and this is one of my favorite shots. I'm going to pull up one of my favorite shots in the whole dang film. It's one of those shots that, like the one I'm showing you now, really does it, or that I was showing you now. But this is the one that when you see this, because of the scene, you leave the bathroom and you get a point of view shot from Karen Black's character, Amelia, and that's what you see as she tries to drown the Zuni warrior. And he comes with a little spear and he loses the spear. And he manages to get a kitchen knife. And as she tries to drown him and she looks back and she sees him creeping up out of the tub, man, that is good stuff. And it begets the Chucky series and, other things like that. The animated doll killer owes itself back to our Zuni warrior here in Amelia.
Dolls are terrifying.
Thing that I think Karen Black is one of the first really true scream queens in my opinion. And luckily Rob Zombie paid a little homage to her when he had her in House of a Thousand Corpses playing the mom. I thought that was like, Rob Zombie, wait, that was a good move.
Yeah.
I was glad he did that.
Here's the test of time test, guys. You like, particularly Miss Sam might be a little too old and JG's kids might be a little too young. We're all jaded. We can go back and look at this and laugh at it or maybe enjoy it for some of the cool filmic things it does. But show it to an 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old kid and see how it affects them. It's bloody, but it's not like gory bloody. Like we can tell he's hurting her, but we see the after effects of like the blood on her clothing and skin. You never really see anything sharp penetrate the skin. So it was a TV movie, so they couldn't get away with too much, but it has that foreboding as this creature is chasing this woman through a little apartment in New York, I believe in New York City. Has anyone
My
seen
life is terrifying right now. He's on 2 screens. Listen, I'm telling you, one of the greatest things ever done by horror movies was to make the doll a bad guy, because
Yeah.
dolls are lifeless. They're just naturally kind of creepy when you look at a doll. It feels like it's just staring right into your soul. So when one of those can actually come to life, though, the fear that this thing, who probably has zero feelings, it doesn't have a soul, any of those things, is going to come after something. Like, it's a pretty cool twist in the horror movies. It always is.
Yes.
Well, and to kind of Jeff Rice says he's a huge Rob Zombie and any killer clown. One of the movies that really got me into the horror comedy genre was Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Me and my friends ate some all natural products that grow in the dark. We went and saw that movie, and you know, you had the soundtrack by the Dickies, which is a punk band, which I love my punk music. And you had those killer clown costumes, and it was so badly shot, but it was so hilarious, you know. And then Sam Raimi, Evil Dead 2, you know, Ash versus Evil Dead. I love that genre.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Anything else on Trilogy of Terror before I do the Serpentine and I come back with my number one?
I believe you're up again, sir.
All right. I'm not going to introduce my film because my film has one of the most iconic images.
I think I know what this is.
It has been voted the scariest film of all time, or one of the scariest films of all time, depending on when you see it. There it is.
Right, I had a feeling.
Yep. Saw this movie as a child, and the only movie to ever give me nightmares. Just an absolutely cool out of that cab. It's actually taken from, and kind of get this in your mind, guys, because I haven't figured out if I could do two things at once. It's actually, that image is actually taken from a French painter in a series called Empire of Light. And it's kind of hard to see, but down in here, we see the house, we see the tree, and we see the lamp casting that light backwards. So it's an homage. Just that shot of the priest getting out of the taxi is an homage to this painting that we've got going on here.
That's so cool.
This film is chock full of all sorts of cool stuff. So I am just going to hit you because some of them are a little longer, but it's got some amazing trivia. The first thing is Linda Blair, the child actress, actually was nominated for an Academy Award, but she didn't do any of the vocalization of the devil or the demon inside of her. That was done through a majority of different sound effects, but it was also done by a female actress by the name of Mercedes McCambridge, and she wasn't credited at first. And this was a big deal between her and the director, William Friedkin. Here's what she did to become Pazuzu, the demon possessing Reagan. She insisted on swallowing raw eggs and chain smoking to alter her vocalizations.
Oh.
Now, she did this even though she had alcohol abuse problems in the past. And she wanted to drink whiskey because she knew it would distort her voice even more. As she was giving up sobriety, you know, she's fighting with this substance abuse. She insisted that a priest is present to counsel her along during the recording process, because she's literally making herself go back to the substance just for this role. At Friedkin, the director, William Friedkin, at his direction, she was also bound to a chair with pieces of torn sheet at her neck, arms, wrists, legs, and feet to get a more realistic sound of the demon struggling against its restraints. While Friedkin admitted that her performance, as well as the extremes with the actress put herself through to gain the authenticity, terrified the director to the modern day. And she never got credit for it. And Blair probably didn't win the Oscar because people didn't realize when she had been nominated that wasn't her voice doing those things. If adjusted for inflation, it would be the 9th highest grossing movie of all time, and I think that's from 16 or 17. A lot of people actually went into hysterics upon seeing the film, but it wasn't because of all the demon stuff. There is a scene where Reagan goes through these medical procedures, and we see them up close as they're like pulling out spinal fluid and stuff, and that freaked out the audience, and so that was a problem. This is beautiful Easter egg kind of stuff. I love this kind of stuff. All right. If you know the film, you know Father Karras. He's trying to they have made a recording of all these voices coming out of Reagan, and he's trying to decipher what is going on. Like, what are these voices? Now, it's kind of hard to see, but right up here above, as Father Karras is leaning against the door jamb, there is a phrase in Japanese that's tasukete, which means help me in Japanese. Love that kind of stuff. Because, of course, we see help me come up on Reagan's flesh at some point during the movie. Now, here is, and I could go on and on and on and on, but this is one of my favorite tidbits right here. In one of the medical scenes, where Reagan is, because she goes, before she gets to the priest and they do all that jazz, she goes through some medical procedures to try and see if she has, something going on in her brain, cancer, et cetera, et cetera. And in that scene, this guy right here that we see with the beard, with the short beard, his name is Paul Bateson. He does this little bit of side work. About 5 years later, he murders a film critic and then is thought to be a serial killer that was known as the bag murderer, in which 6 male victims were mutilated and dismembered, and the remains wrapped in black plastic and dumped into the Hudson River. And in a really weird twist of fate, if any of you know the old movie Cruising by Al Pacino, also directed by William Friedkin, the bag murderer is a central part of the plot of Cruising. So it's got all this weird kind of stuff. There's a ton of stuff on The Exorcist out there, all sorts of jazz. I rewatched it. It's not as scary as it was, but I still hold it as one of the scariest films ever. Like with Eric, it's not particularly gory except for 1 or 2 scenes, but it's just super gets under your skin. Last thing I'll say, when they're in The Exorcist, when they're actually performing The Exorcist, which by the way takes 9 minutes of film time, and they're up there, they have to do all sorts of really cool things with the lighting. In addition, they had to chill that room so they could see the actor's breath. They initially chilled it down to freezing, which worked, but then when the lights of the filming came on, it warmed it up too much. So they chilled it down to -20 so that it could compensate for the lights and you could see all of that breath coming out. So those actors were acting in -20, and Friedkin loved it. Friedkin's a little bit like Kubrick. Like, he doesn't mind torturing his actors to get that performance. And he thought that them being that cold would just aid their acting, because you cannot not display the cold of -20 degrees.
Well, and one thing, I don't remember the exact volume, but I heard they had to use like 20 gallons of split pea soup for the vomit scene.
Yeah.
And can you imagine the PA that had to open up all those cans? Because you don't really get big bulk cans of.
No, you don't. Yeah.
You know.
And interestingly, the actress, I forget her name already, that did the demon voice, she made a concoction of something that caused her to throw up so she could do the vomiting voice of the demon. Because that wasn't even Linda Blair doing the vomiting, the sound effect of the vomit. That was the actress who had done all the other vocal and audio work for possessed Reagan.
That's method acting to the next level.
Yeah.
Risking your sobriety.
Yes. Daniel Day-Lewis level shit, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is crazy stuff.
2 scenes that have forever stood out from The Exorcist, that are forever etched into my brain when I saw this at 7 years old. Again, thank you to my uncles for really destroying me at such a young age to where horror today, I don't care what horror it is, just makes me smile. And that doesn't say much for my psyche. I know that. I know it makes me way too happy to watch these horrible things happen to people. The scene where she comes in the very beginning and she urinates on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, guys can pee on the floor. Like, girls don't do that kind of stuff, right? So as a 7-year-old seeing her do that, I was like, my brain couldn't wrap it around that she just did that.
Right.
Right. So that was one. And then the other, we all know very well, the crucifix scene and just all very graphic, very surreal. And it was, I mean, my young brain couldn't fathom it then. But what I've learned as I got older was, good God, this movie back when it came out, what were people thinking? Because this was a different time too.
Totally.
It was a much more conservative America you're living in.
Yeah.
And this movie pushed the bounds on so many levels that I couldn't imagine what it was like to be around when that movie actually came out and the response it got back then.
I could speak to a couple of those things, Joe. The first thing was my mom took me to this film at 5 or 6. The only scene she did the eye cover on was the crucifixion scene.
Yeah, well, yeah.
She put the hand over. So I could look at all the other stuff, but I wasn't looking at that.
Right.
There were very conservative religious groups that thought the film was propagating the message of Satan, so much so that for 6 months after the premiere, Linda Blair had armed security with her to protect her at all times.
Wow.
So it was a very real kind of thing as far as that went. But on the other side, Warner Brothers execs would come to the set every week to see the viewing, and they were all, this is just so stupid and ridiculous. There's no way this thing's going to make money. Which just goes to show you that the guys that are making the money in the suits don't usually know what to do with good art.
Yeah. Well, that's why they're the guys with the money. Nobody's asking them to understand the art. Nobody's asking them to understand what's going on in the studio. And to me, that's what's happened as film has gone along in its life, is that nowadays you're seeing more and more, we're just going to trust the guys that are making the films to make them, and we'll just put the money and collect the money when it comes in. That's about what we'll do here.
Yeah.
Well, the industry's changed a lot, you know, thanks to films like Clerks and, you know, all these other indie films that, you know, were done on a shoestring budget, like Blair Witch. Look at the impact that had on the horror movie. You know, it gives the director and the writer and the owner, you know, gives them more credit, as opposed to, you know, when they go for their next movie, they got some money, people believe in them, they get a little more leeway than a second time director normally would.
Right. All right. That's my number one scariest of all time. I'm going to throw the ball over to Eric. And Eric is going to do his number one.
All right. Like I said, I did movies from the 2000s. So a movie that I saw that just creeped me out. Just, I've got a little claustrophobia thing going on, and I have a little fear of heights thing going on. Well, there's a movie that came out in 2005, and they actually filmed it and made it in England and everything. And it has a complete alternate ending from the original one in America, because the original ending did not test well in America. So they had an alternate ending for the one that you'll rent or see or whatever. And that movie is The Descent. And a little cool trivia, that picture was actually based off of a Salvador Dali painting.
Yep.
And that same Salvador Dali painting was used as the death's head moth, the little skull in the center of that on the cover or on the poster for Silence of the Lambs. That little tiny piece is based on that Salvador Dali as well. And the creator of the movie, I'm going brain dead on it right now. He did that as an homage to Silence of the Lambs, because that was kind of one of his big inspirational movies. He was he was inspired by that. Aliens, The Shining, Deliverance, The Thing, and Silence of the Lambs are what he credits for giving him the kind of mojo and juice he wanted to get with this movie. Now, for those that haven't heard of it, the premise is this group of all these beautiful young girls in their 20s are going spelunking. Maybe you don't know what spelunking is. That's basically rock climbing upside down into caves.
Insanity.
Yeah. So, boom, my claustrophobia, you know, and there's scenes where they're crawling through super tight spaces. And I was just, and I even rewatched it earlier in the week, knowing that this was coming up. And it just got to me. And then later, I wasn't expecting it, and I'm not going to go into it because I'm not going to do any spoilers if you haven't seen it. But there was a time where I was like, that they got me with this movie. They got me. It's not a slasher movie. It's like a action thriller horror, if that really makes sense. But one thing that's really cool is the I'll just call them the bad guys. They didn't want the girls to know what the bad guys were going to look like. So they didn't get to see them till they actually filmed the first scene with the bad guys because they wanted that anticipation to build of, well, what are they, you know, because for 3-4 months, they know the scene's coming up and they're just wondering, what are they going to look like, you know? And so that's kind of where the director was going, the writer director was going with that direction. And it does have a little bit of blood and guts and stuff, but it's more the psychological thriller, you know, being down miles underground or however far they go. And since I saw this when it first came out, I've started rock climbing, and I've been rock climbing, and I've had friends ask me to go spelunking with them or go caving with them. No, this movie is the reason why I will not go spelunking or cave diving or whatever you want to call it.
That's awesome. I have not seen this film. Joe, have you seen this film?
I've seen Descent. I absolutely and completely love the movie. I always have from the first time I've seen it. It's one of those movies that whenever it's on, I'm watching it.
Nice.
The basic premise behind it, though, like Johnny said, is a little bit infuriating because you shouldn't be in the damn cave to begin with, and that's just my opinion, right? So the basic premise is infuriating. However, first of all, one thing that always draws me to this movie is there's an extremely hot Asian chick who runs with this crew. She is absolutely drop dead gorgeous and worth watching every minute of on that screen. The storyline, though, was very, very well done. They pieced it together very well. And these, like, it would be scary enough just being trapped in that cave, right? Not knowing how you're going to get out, the darkness, all those things. But one of man's greatest fears is what we can't see.
Yeah.
But we don't know what's coming at us.
Right.
So you're trapped in a cave. You can barely see what's in front of you. And now there's something down there trying to kill you. It's all the fears mashed into one, right, to where if you can immerse yourself in that situation, every one of your senses on overdrive at that point. And
check this one out.
Yeah. You know, it was just gonna, I'm telling you, man, there's scenes in that movie that make your chest start. Because you're waiting for what's coming.
Right, right.
Very well done. Very well shot. Just beautiful job, really.
Who's the director, Eric? Do you know off the top of your head?
I forgot to write it down,
But not a name that resonates, right? Just someone who did a very good film.
Yeah, he wrote and directed it.
Okay.
I don't remember if I watched it on Prime or Netflix, so just a second.
And while Eric is Loading that up. Joe, I don't know what order you want me to do your picks for, so just go ahead and cue me. I've got them ready to go. Just cue me with which ones you want at what time.
All right. You got it, brother. But yeah, I did. I absolutely loved this movie. This girl that they're showing in this picture right now,
Yeah.
really, they played on the psychological end for her too, because she was going through things in the movie, the loss of a child and stuff, and really played upon her psychological well-being throughout the whole film. And then here she is tossed into an underworld situation with monsters coming at her from all different ends. And she winds up being one of the stronger ones in the group when she was the weaker one. Like, they really did a great job with it all. Really did a very nice job with it all.
Okay. Written and directed by Neil Marshall.
Okay. I've not heard of him. Deliberately, Ron had it in there. Not heard of that guy.
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. So if you have Prime, you can watch it for free.
Oh, awesome. Which I do. And so I will. Thank you, sir. All right, Joe, you get to finish off our top threes.
All right, guys. So, like I said, I did this list a little differently. I did it with the movies that made me fall in love with the genre, the movies that brought me here. And Joe, I'm going to ask you to pull up the title screen picture of the movie.
Gotcha.
And it is going to be the original anthology, for me at least, and it's Creepshow. Creepshow, for me, was the original anthology because it was the first one I ever saw. It was the first one I had ever heard of.
Mm-hmm.
I had never heard of anything like this before, where a multitude of short stories were brought together to make one movie. At my young age at the time, I had never seen anything like it, and my uncle showed it to me because they said, and I quote, "The kid sitting on the bed at the beginning of the movie is reading a comic. He ain't much older than you. You're good to go. Don't worry about it, Joe. You can watch this." That was the way they rationalized it, right? So I wrote down a ton of stuff here, but Creepshow, the budget was $8 million. They made $21 million in the theaters. That's it, right? Which, you look at it, they didn't even triple their money, which movies are trying to do back then. But the theaters weren't really the proving ground for this movie. Once it got on VHS and stuff, it began to build like a cult-like following,
right?
Yeah,
of fans and horror genre guys who just had to have this and wanted it. And even when they re-released it on Blu-ray recently, people went nuts and they were selling out of this at any place they carried it.
Mm-hmm.
It has a real cult-like following to this movie, and for multiple reasons, right? Now, of course, one of the reasons people love this is because of the pairing that made the original. So you've got Stephen King doing the writing, and you've got George A. Romero running the show.
Yeah.
So you've got the Zombie King and you've got the Horror King coming together, and they're going to make anything they can here. And the funny part was Romero really wanted to focus on the horror aspect of things, right? But apparently these two had known each other for a long time. They were long friends. And Stephen King said, no. We love the comics. That's what we grew up on, sir. We grew up on the comics, and the ones we loved were by EC Comics.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to base Creepshow off of EC comic titles. And what we'll do to thank them is, if you can actually pull up one of the cartoon ones, Joe.
Yes.
The cartoon artworks real quick.
Yep. Gotcha.
To thank EC Artwork, or to thank EC Comics back then, what they did was they reached out to them and they asked them to do the comic drawings for the film. So anytime you saw a comic drawing like this come up or something, it was done by the drawers over at EC Comics, and it was their way of paying homage to them as well. Like, you guys are the reason we're doing this, and we're going to let your artwork be what carries us through this film. In between segments, you had these little art bits pop up, and it was their work. And I thought that was pretty cool, of two guys who were as big as King and Romero, even back then. Those were big names, to pay homage to the comic books that really started it all for them. Right? Now, Creepshow had, like I said, a bunch of different stories. I'll just go through them real quick. You had the Father's Day one, which, if you haven't seen it, don't kill your dad on Father's Day. It doesn't end well for anybody in those situations, okay? You had the Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill. Now, the funny thing is about that one, Stephen King is the main character in that one, right? he got killed by critics because he played the role of a huckleberry, as they called it back then, way over the top. He's a country boy, and he plays it like he is just the most stereotypical country boy on the planet. Like, he doesn't have one active brain cell in his head, right? But that's the way Romero wanted him to play it, because he said it's supposed to be a comic. So I want you to take it over the top. So when the critics killed Stephen King for it, he looked at Romero and said, "This is your fault. This is all your fault, sir. I could have killed this role. You did this to me," right? So you also had something that tied over you. You had the crate, and you had their creeping up on you. All individual stories. Now, not all of them had like big name actors in them, but a few did. And some of the actors that were in these, you had Ted Danson, who during the 80s was apparently somehow a heartthrob to the women of the world. I don't know how that works, but you know,
He had a good hair.
You had a very young Ed Harris, and you had Leslie Nielsen. And a funny story about Leslie Nielsen. So when the tide that comes over you, at the end of that short story, Leslie Nielsen looks like he's gone mad. And instead of being scared as these creatures are coming after him, he's hysterically laughing like he's lost his mind. Well, the reason he's laughing so hard is because on set, him and Romero decided they were going to prank people, right? They were going to crank them. They were going to prank them. They were going to do whatever they could to mess with people. Leslie Nielsen brought a fart machine on set and set it in the weirdest situations where a monster's supposed to jump out, and instead they'd open a box or something and it would start farting. And he lost his mind laughing his brains out one minute, and Romero said, "Cut the camera to him right now." And they filmed that, and that's what they used for the final scene in that shot.
That's cool.
So, you know, things like that are just absolutely what's so cool about this. But the funny part that most people wouldn't notice unless you're like me and dive into these movies quite crazy, and then I guess like the critics online and such, the biggest star of this movie through all these stories is the marble ashtray that killed the dad in the first story. Why? If you go and watch all 5 stories and pay attention to each one of them, that ashtray is in every single story.
Yep.
That same exact ashtray makes an appearance in every story. Now you got to spot it. It's not just out there wide out in the open for you to see, but it's there. So I thought that was a cool way of them tying the whole thing together. And something else that's not too known, as we all know, Stephen King has made his own universe, really, right? His books, his novels, his movies, they all tie together in some weird universe, right? Well, this also ties into all that, and to make sure his fans would know that in the future, at the end of the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill, as they pan out to the street where the greenery's starting to take over, there's a sign that says Castle Rock that way, which is exactly what Stephen King created, the town of Castle Rock, which is completely fictionalized, but is where most of his stories take place.
Right.
Yep.
So both of their stamps were on this movie all over the place, man. Like, they really laid out something amazing here. And unfortunately, they didn't get back together for the second one. The second one was just Romero running the show. It did not have King involved, unfortunately. I would have liked to have seen them get together for that one as well, because when they finally decided to work together on this one, Romero said, "I'm ready to go, and now how long do you need?" Stephen King said 60 days. Romero didn't believe him because he had to write at least 5 stories for this movie. So he's like, there's no way. 60 days later, the first draft was sent to Romero, and Stephen King said, "We're ready to roll." So these guys were at their best, and I threw out an Easter egg for you here, Joe. Same one, the Stephen King one, Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill. There is a WWE match going on the screen. Who was doing the announcing for that match? None other than Vince McMahon.
Oh, no kidding.
So the WWE owner makes or at least his voice makes an appearance in the original Creep Show. Like, and one other thing, if you like the horror effects and stuff, Tom Savini has his stamp all over this film. If you don't know what Tom Savini is, you got to go do some work on the slasher flicks and stuff. This right here is one of his creations. I was about to ask Joe to pull it up. The Creature in the Crate, which he had to make all on his own. He had to figure this out on his own. The other one was the thing they called the Creeper, which is the very beginning of the movie where the little boy's on his bed and he gets the comic taken from him. He created the Creeper who comes to his window and says, kind of, come with me, let's go get your comic, if you will. One last fact for you boys. The little boy sitting on the bed that starts this whole movie is actually Joe Hill, Stephen King's son. So it was a full-on family affair. And for me, this movie has stood the test of time a million ways from Sunday. Look, I get it. You go back and watch it. Some of the effects are a little bit off now. Some things are weird, but this was what made horror amazing to me, was all the different angles you could approach it, the different looks you could take at things. There's some sci-fi with this. There's horror. There's gore. There's everything to this set. Creepshow is easily one of my favorite horror movies, and it's the one that dragged me in for sure.
Awesome, Joe. Quick Joe Hill comment, since we're talking about comics. I don't know how many of you know Joe Hill's works. He's made a name for himself as a horror writer. He did a comic called Lock and Key. I forget how many issues it was, but they just released a few months back the first season of it on Netflix. I haven't watched it. I have read the entirety of the comics. Eric, it sounds like something more up your alley, which is a horror but more psychological terror kind of thing, and less about the slasher kind of vibe, but more on that terror. My Netflix queue is just so long. That's the only reason I haven't got to it. But I love the comic series.
Yeah, I've watched the first couple episodes of Lock and Key. But going back to Creepshow, Stephen King was junior high and high school was my favorite author in early college years. And I read everything he had. I went into the movies and saw every movie that came out that was, done by him. And the majority of the ones that I think are just outstanding normally come from his short stories.
Yes.
Like Stand By Me.
Yes. That whole book, Eric, has been converted into films, and they're all, I wasn't a Christine Tommyknockers It guy, but freaking At Pupil, Rita Hayworth, Shawshank Redemption, I forget the exact, I mean, when Stephen King writes reality that verges on horror, like Misery or Gerald's Game, that's to me when he's at his best. When he gets into the Pet Sematary and Christine, I prefer to read Dean Koontz. If I was always a Dean Koontz guy, but King with that realistic stuff, God, is he good?
Yeah, and that was my natural progression, was Stephen King to Dean Koontz, and then that took me into college and post college and stuff. And then I got into reading all other genres, but yeah, Stephen King, like I say, his short stories that they've converted, amazing. My favorite Stephen King book and my favorite Stephen King miniseries was The Stand. And I would love to see them redo that. I own The Stand. It came out in the late 80s, and it was, I don't remember how many episodes, but since it was on TV, just like the original It was a miniseries, they weren't able to do a lot of the stuff that would have been done and could be done if they redid it. And with the success of it wouldn't surprise me to see a reboot of The Stand.
Had that one-hit wonder band out of England in the 1980s, The Alarm, had that song called The Stand that was on the airwaves, at least in San Diego at that time. Very catchy number. That's where I first heard of The Stand, was through The Alarm song. And yeah, someone mentioned Dark Tower, Camo Cam. That's McConaughey and Idris Elba, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. You could do no better for me than Idris Elba. I know people are hit or miss on McConaughey. I love him, particularly True Detective Season 1. What a freaking tour de force of acting that is by McConaughey, essentially playing two characters that are the same character. I haven't watched it, but I've always wanted to. I haven't read The Dark Tower, and I never will. I'm just too damn old.
I've read The Dark Tower and watched the movie. watch the movie second.
Okay.
Read the book first. The book's
Yeah.
much better. The book's
Yeah.
much better. Gives you a lot more detail, like the book usually does.
Yeah.
But there's a big difference here. Two little Easter eggs for you, Joe, that I thought you would appreciate.
Yeah.
So in the Father's Day one, right? There's a part where the dead father is crawling up out of the grave, if you remember, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And he has maggots falling out of his eyes.
Yes.
Well, they didn't use all maggots. There were a couple in there,
Okay.
but they didn't use them all. What they used to create the maggots, or the look of maggots, was actually Rice Krispie treats. They used Rice Krispie treats in the man's eyes. And also, this film, Creepshow, if you're a Walking Dead fan out there, you better thank Creepshow for your showrunner, because this is the movie that introduced Greg Nicotero to the film world. He was from George Romero's hometown. They had known each other. He went to him in high school and said, "This is what I want to do." So when George Romero was making this film, he called back home to him and said, "Do you want to come to the set and learn how to make a movie with me?" So this is the movie that inspired Greg Nicotero and sent him off on his path. So,
interesting. Romero's hometown, which is one of the suburbs of Pittsburgh, if I'm not mistaken, because they always make a big deal about him here.
Well, and Romero is the godfather when it comes to zombie movies.
Sure.
I mean, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead. There would be no zombie genre, so you wouldn't get all these Disney zombie shows and stuff nowadays, or The Walking Dead, or any of that stuff without Romero.
Right. Well, all right, boys. I mean, I think we set out to do something, and we got it done. Guys in the audience, if you enjoyed this, we're doing, again, 2 of these a month. Right now, we have some ideas about what things we want to do. We might do spotlight shows where each one of us takes a topic and we do that. Might do something where we all converse and do something like we did tonight, which was like kind of a group decision. And obviously, if you're digging this, DM one of us if you'd like to see us cover something on here that we can either fit into something we're already doing or devote an entire show to, depending on what it is. We would love to do it. We will do this as long as it takes us, because I think we're all impassioned about it. I mean, my goodness, Joe said he never did homework in high school, but I saw his notes for his stuff today, and that was some good stuff there on his end.
Hey, man, I told you if I was doing this, I was doing it like right. I was going to come in with some facts and some knowledge and things like that. Again, I love those movies. I could have talked about them forever, but the little Easter eggs, things like that, I probably wouldn't have remembered at the moment. So writing all that down was a necessity to me. I had to come in prepared for you boys.
Couple other announcements real quick. If you like No Country for Old Men, I have, I think, a 10 to 12 episode full analysis of that film on this channel because it's one of my favorite films of all time. And what I'm also going to probably try and do is do little short bits of film language and talk a little bit about how film tells story that perhaps we don't quite catch, shots, angles, things of that nature, so that if you want to get into actually being more of an active viewer as well as a fan, I'll hopefully make those resources available to you. And they'll be really short. They'll be like 3 to 5 minutes. And we'll see if I can actually get a bunch out. But that's the plan, at least, to kind of be the educational sister part of this show for any of you guys out there that want that as well. Eric, anything else you want to add tonight?
Yeah, we're going to add a 4th person occasionally, and one that I'm super excited for. Is a great guy, the owner from Last Looks, Michael, because he is in the film industry. His 2 biggest passions, or 3 biggest passions, are movies, his company, and he's vegan. He's been vegan for 13 years. So that's why when I went plant-based, I started getting into his company. I already had a couple oils from being a big movie buff, but we've had great conversations. And I think having him have kind of the industry POV that I know I don't have, but his day job is in, working on sets. He's got his own company with a partner, and as well as, he wants to act and direct and everything. He just has some insights that stuff that I have no clue about. And I think he's going to be awesome on here.
Yes, sir. Joe, anything else you'd like to say?
I want to thank Barbado Joe for hosting the show, obviously, for inviting me on. Greatly appreciated. I'm excited to do the next one. I want to thank everyone who sat here and listened to us and watched us tonight. I know it's a Saturday night, guys. You got a ton of options. Well, actually, let's be honest there. You don't have as many options as you normally would right now, but you still have options. It's Halloween night, man. There's a good horror movie on somewhere, and you sat here and hung out with us for a couple hours. That's awesome. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys. And, yeah, I can't wait for the next one, man. Joe, I'm pumped. Let's do it. I'm in.
Let's do it. And I just want to echo everything that Joe said. Again, hit us up on Instagram. You could even drop comments on the live because I'll check them as far as ideas and stuff like that. And hopefully we can make this into something that maybe even stretches beyond, assuming that we could watch the films and do the research beyond twice a month, because you got 3 fired up dudes right here that would love to talk films with y'all. All right, boys. Have a great one. You'll see Joe somewhere. You'll see me somewhere. You'll see Eric somewhere. He just made some tortilla soup. Go check that video out.
Not uploaded yet. I've edited it. I need to upload it, which is the longest part of the process.
Of course. And thank you guys.
A really cool unboxing coming.
Okay, a cool unboxing.
Very cool.
I'm learning how to do this side of it, so when I want to overthrow Johnny Grooms when the coup comes and it's just barbell therapy, I can do that stuff. I got a lot of on-the-job training tonight. I'm coming for you, Johnny Grooms.
Well, listen, you got another Jay from Jersey that's always willing to take your spot. I love you, Johnny, but I'm always here.
Take care, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Halloween. See you soon. Bye-bye.